Hello everybody, in this video I'll be explaining some of the doubts and hopefully clearing some of your confusion regarding access control. This was a new twist that we added to this assignment because it seemed a little too mundane, and this is also something that will carry over. Like in every assignment you'll have a small twist, so there seemed to be some confusion. I hope I can clear that through this video. So this is just what you are expected to implement. I have just copied and pasted the things from the PDF. This is for the system class, if you remember. And the main point is I wanted to show you maybe two main points here. The first one was this one, that you have a list of all users. This will make it really easy. And the second thing is this access control, which seemed little non-trivial apparently to understand. Although we try to make it clear. Okay, so this seemed like quite a lot to read, so let me try to break it down. So we have some methods here you might recognize, add user, follow user, and add post, and so on. These are things that generated a sample output. Now the extra user ID parameter is here, so in yellow. You have a user ID that's passed into every method of this class that needs access control. And if the user ID doesn't belong to a user in the list of users, which is part of one of its variables that it has, then the method should terminate at that point and print invalid user. Much like what you would do, let's say, if a user didn't exist, if you were to add a post for that user. So you have an extra argument here, a validator ID. So this is like a user ID, int or whatever. So I do remember saying that many times user IDs are not always simple integers, are normally really random complex numbers, and they have a lot of encoding in them, and it's quite difficult to represent that. But for now it's just simple integers which are statically generated and incremented for every user, much like what you're used to. So we're going to exploit that property and use this third parameter here, validator ID. Now you should use a judgment as to where you would need to use this access control. As a rule of thumb, generally when we make a system, we don't really need access control there because we don't have any users. And similarly for adding user, the first user would not have a validator ID, so it would just keep on repeating with an invalid input if you try to add your first user. So for your add user and create system and so on, you won't really need it, and also in your constructor you won't need it as mentioned here. Now what is this access control doing? Oh yeah, one more thing. You won't need it for getters and setters also, at least for this assignment. So you can keep that in mind as well. So what is it essentially doing? As the description says, you should check for the list of users and you should see if the user ID matches. If it does, then you can add things, follow users or add posts and so on. So I just put that in pseudocode over here. So this is the objects get users list. Of course, if you're doing this in the system class as well, if you won't really need this getter, or you can just use the variable as it is. Now you check for each user and you check for the user ID. If it is matching, then you just continue with whatever your implementation is of follow user, add a user to one of its vectors. Now, if for all of the users belonging to this list, if the user IDs don't match, you have to terminate then and there with invalid input. Now you might be wondering why we have this access control. Is it just is it just there for the sake of being there, or is it something else that actually has a purpose? Yeah, the idea is we wanted to have some kind of quote unquote login system. So we wanted some kind of a way for a person who's going to use the system to prove their identity. So that's why we have this rudimentary system of passing their user ID in to make sure that at least this person is there in the input. Ordinarily, of course, it would be a lot more complex, I'm sure you can imagine. But this was supposed to be an exercise in object-oriented programming and also an exercise in method manipulation. And I feel like this serves that purpose. Now, you might be thinking, well, I haven't included this third parameter in any of my methods. This seemed too confusing. There's only 2 days left. To which I'd like to say, yeah, you have plenty of time. It's due tomorrow, if I'm not wrong. And I've tried this myself. Obviously, we wrote the code for this because we made the assignment. I've tried this myself. It doesn't take more than 20 lines of code. And the fact is, lines of code is also not as important as how easy it is. So yeah, I'm sure you can do it. And if you have any other doubts, please let us know. Thank you.